Hello, and in this video we're going to create a road system from our OCM files. So in here previously I already have my OCM imported and I cut out a little piece to work with just so it calculates somewhat faster. So I want to use a filter here, OCM filter, and I want to disable buildings and generate roads. And I don't want to have all these enabled, so I might disable a few of them like this. And now I want to take out my road tool. And in here, this can be found in labs or in this project file. It's going to generate these roads for us. So we'll have these big intersection pieces and we can go to the length units and make them smaller if you want to. You can have to tweak this value depending on what roads you have. We can also change the width if you want to have bigger or smaller parts. So in this case, I'm going to keep it to default. We can also plug in our modular models. So all these pieces over here that are in the middle. So if I visualize this, so everything that is green is a modular piece. So we can just use modular pieces in Game Engine to fill in the straight parts. So we can have a custom piece over here. So that is just some basic settings of the road tool. Now we can use a second OCM file. And what we can do here is we can disable everything and have a other node here. And then we have these other roads, which can be used for smaller roads. So let's just merge this together. And you can see that our road tool then nicely already integrates this as well. But now we want to have different size variation on these parts. So I'm going to do a create attribute. And in here, I'm going to create a new attribute, which is called the width. So width. And this is actually stored in primitive because each primitive can hold a different line width. So primitive, then let's just, you can already see it's going back to 0. So let's say this is 1. And let's say the width here, instead of 1, is, for example, 0.5. And you can see that these are then smaller than the other ones. So I can have a size variation, which goes here. Then we also have 3 different outputs here. So the first output is what you see is this geometry. The second output are just our lines. So if I would take a null node, we can then have the outer lines, which can be very useful later on. And then the last input is the point cloud for our instancing. So if you want to do instancing, we can do this as well. So let's focus more on getting this properly in Game Engine. So let's set up the first information, and I'm going to use a blast node. And with this blast node over here, I'm going to delete all the modular roads. So only have the unique roads, let's say, because I'm going to use the instancing input for my straight pieces. So then I want to create a border, and from here I want to have a blast node, and I want to use the lines for my border information. So I'm going to use the new group called line straight. So these are all the lines that I want to use for my border. And I want to use a polypath. And this node will make sure that our lines are nicely one piece. So if I would enable primitive view, you can see the difference between how much primitive are used on the line. So I want to make sure that's clean. And then I want to use a for each connected piece. So basically for each line, I'm going to loop over each individual piece. So in here, what I want to do is I want to create a polyframe just so I get the right normals. And I'm going to make sure I fill in the tangent name N here for normals. Then I want to use a face node. This will just be used to This will then be used to clean up my shape. So I'm going to use the remove inline points. So I will just help clean up my shape. And then I want to use the sweep node itself. And let's just, for example, take a round cube, and you can see that we instantly are getting some shapes in our curve. But in this situation, I want to make a more custom shape. So what I did here is I made a grid and I just beveled the edges. Just so we have this shape, and I want to use this as my new shape to sweep. So I'm going to switch back to second input. And now I have this result. So I have this shape that I made here that is now nicely swept along that line. Now we could also here close the end, because now we are just an open geometry, and let's just close this with a single polygon and fill this in here, and it will loop over all pieces. And now we have nicely all these connections. So this will be my border. So then I have my main road, my border, and now I also want to have the pavement to walk on. And what I want to do for that is I want to use a fuse node. I'm going to start from the first input again, so fusing this geometry together. Then I want to extrude this. I want to use this option over here, and I want to set this to global, just so we stay consistent. So we can move this up or down now. I'm going to move this down by 5 units. And I'm also going to make sure this is closed. So it's a fully closed shape. Then we can also notice that this is being reversed. So we need to reverse this again. So we have the better geometry. And then I'm going to extrude this again. What I'm doing here will be making more sense in a sec. I'm going to boost this a little bit. And now I want to boolean these shapes together. So I want to union them. So they're one big piece now. Everything is one big piece. And now I want to ask the bounds from my extrusion over here. And now I can boolean these two results together. So I hope this will make more sense what I've been doing here. So now I have created this geometry here on the side for the pavement. What you can also do here is you can enable the orient bounding box region. And now you can see that this bounding box orients a bit more along the rotation of the information that I have. So this can also be great to have enabled. What you can also do here is play around with the padding options. Like you can shrink some of the main parts. You can play around with that. So then further on, I want to use the split by primitive normal. So use this, and I only want to have the Y up. So only have this flat surface right now. So again, also here might also be useful to just clean up this shape. So I'm just going to use a clean node, make sure all the information is gone, just to have a cleaner version. Then I want to have a UV projector, and we need a decent UVs. So in this case, I'm just going to project UVs on this, and let's say 15 by 15. So when I would do a quick shade, my UVs will look like this. So now I can just simply rotate my UV until they follow the pavement nicely. So what I'm doing here might not be perfect for every situation. So in this case, I noticed that my information is quite grid-like. So you can see that the streets are quite along a grid. So I can just rotate my UVs to match that grid. So, but this is just like a very simplistic setup to get a pavement. So then we have the three key information here for my road system. So let's merge this together and see how this combines together. So I have my intersections, I have the border around it, and I have the pavement for it. Now we can also move up the pavement a bit more. So just gonna place down a transform, and let's just move this just a bit so it's a bit higher than the street, like this. And then we can assign Unreal materials. So we can just type in Unreal material, and then we need to fill in here the path to my shader. And in Unreal I have these materials, and what I will be doing is same as with the model. So right click and copy reference, and I'm going to paste this reference in my material. So in here, just pasting down the reference. So this was, for example, for the main road, the asphalt. This was, for example, for the main road. And now I'm going to repeat this process with my other materials. So placing down these material nodes and then filling in the correct instance. So now this is set up, and I'm going to merge this with the geometry output here. So whenever everything combined, we have this nicely set up. Also, I forgot to put an output node here, just to make sure we're always outputting this result. And to make this also complete, I'm going to instance my road models. So over here, just going to create a null node. So this is then my road instance. And I'm just going to use a attribute create. And in here, I'm going to fill in my Unreal instance and copy again. So this is a string. So, and then we copy the path here like I did before. So in here, I set the path and merge this with the other instances. So let's save this tool and see what it gives us in Unreal. And this is what I'm having now in Unreal Engine. So I can see that most of it is working, except here for my main road. These pieces are not correctly following everything. So I might get back into Houdini and tweak it. So what I noticed here, what you need to do is to create a other attribute, and that is called orientation. So because by default the orientation was not set up, so we need to set up a orientation. And this is also a size 4, and that's the only thing we need to do. So just making sure that we have this set up. And further from this orientation, it's always a good idea to also here from geometry make sure we are setting a normal. So in this case, when we save this asset and rebuild this in Unreal, that solved the issue. So now as you can see, my street is now nicely following as it should be. So that's working great. Now there's also one thing I have not explained about the intersections is in Houdini we are having this red vertex color, and this is for UVs. So if I would go to my roads here, I actually have 2 UV channels. So I have the first one over here, and I have also a second one. So if I would place down a quick shade node and view my unwrapping, so we can see now that it's being nicely laid out, the unwrap, except the beginning over here. They are just a bit not really following what we want to. But when I switch to the first channel, like the beginning starts nicely over here. It's nicely aligned along the road, but then coming closer to the middle, it's getting somewhat stretched because we are sort of forcing the UVs nicely along these pieces. So what I will be doing with this vertex color, this red color, is I'm going to blend between two UV spaces or 2 UV sets. So in Unreal, let me quickly grab the shader. So we have the shader over here, and what we can do here is we can switch between text coordinate 0 and number 1. So this means looking at the UV number 1, looking at the UV number 2. And then with the vertex color, the red color, I can then switch between which version I want to see, number 1 or number 2. And this is how I can get rid of the stretching in the middle of the road. And that was it for this video. So we have set up a basic road for my city, and then the next video will be then covering adding a few props here and there to decorate the city.